Thanks, Phil, and welcome to everybody to the webinar today. It's been quite a 16 months of disruption, and as Director of Education at the University of Kent, I've been really at the forefront of some of our responses to, I think I've got it, Phil, responses to the pandemic and the ongoing disruption that this has caused. And whilst I think universities have adapted very quickly and effectively to these changes, I think our longer term responses to COVID will require us to reflect on the experiences that staff and students have had in order to inform where we go next with digital learning and student experience. Our short-term responses really sought to sustain effective technical support for remote teaching and research. We had to bridge the digital divide to provide online access for all staff and students. And of course, we had to transition our face-to-face pedagogies and assessment to remote settings. Like many of you, these processes have not only challenged our traditional institutional approaches of teaching and learning, but have also prompted us to consider how our educational provision and student experience needs to transform in the COVID era. Now, when my colleague Kendall launched his book about a month ago, I'm not sure he had a premonition that we were going to be facing a pandemic, but the image on the front of his book, I think, is a very good indication of where we've been for the last few years. I think clearly as we entered the pandemic, things were precarious, it was turbulent, and we were probably ill prepared for the journey we were about to embark on. And there were several things that we had to address almost in priority order. The first of these was the capacity and capability of staff and students to work in this new world. And we had to address digital poverty and digital literacy.
Sorry, Louise.
Yes.
Sorry, would you be able to move the slide forward? We can just see the front slide, the first one.
I have moved it forward.
I don't think we can see it. Do you want me to just quickly share the presentation my end?
Yes, want to do that. That's fine. That's fine. I have moved it forward here, but I'm sorry if it's not displaying for you. I'll continue chatting, Phil, while you work in the back.
Okay.
So what we've had to do is moving to our emergency remote teaching, obviously provide advice and guidance for students in the ways that we're going to be changing our teaching, learning and assessment practices, as well as moving exams online. We've had a lot of ongoing feedback from staff and students that has taught us a lot about what students really value in their higher education, and the sense in which the key role that staff play in developing academic communities and a sense of belonging. Are you managing to get there, Phil? Have you got the slides, Phil?
I'm showing the slide now. You're on the second slide.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. But what we noted is that one of the concerns was the loss of the sense of belonging and the development of academic communities, the collaboration that goes on in the learning process. And that expedited for us many developments in MS Teams and Moodle to improve functionality to enable more interactive and collaborative work. So I go to slide 3, Phil. You see that?
Yep. I'll move it on. Just tell me when you want me to move the slide.
Okay. Thank you. So like many of you, one of the first things we did was to create online modules for staff, where we talked about introducing them to teaching online, and that included contributions from departments using different technologies, and created a space to share ideas and concerns. All of our staff and graduate teaching assistants were enrolled. We had 300 hours of video delivered through this mechanism. And we've continued to enhance this module as we've gone through, based on staff and student surveys about how our teaching and learning has been going online. There's also been a lot of sharing of practice and innovation, which we share at both staff and student webinars. And I've given you an example at the right-hand side of some of the work done by our biosciences colleagues, where they were providing students with a virtual lab experience. The module we created for students was entitled Online Learning at Kent. This was a guide to successful study online. And I think the important thing we had to pull out there, first of all, is how online learning differs from face-to-face teaching. We gave them illustrative examples of online activities, and at their request actually provided additional advice about what we've called netiquette and expected behaviours online. And that could include things around the issue to do with cameras on, cameras off, and so on. Again, all of our students were automatically enrolled on this, and about 600 hours of video was delivered. Over 70% of our students who were surveyed in October last year, the new student survey, were satisfied with this module, commenting that it was a necessary prerequisite for having a better learning experiences in the unprecedented COVID era. So if we move on to the next one, this is a slide that I had provided by an ex-colleague, Professor Ali Armelini, who is now at the University of Portsmouth. And I think it's a really nice way, visual way of representing the journey that we've been through. So we've moved from what I would call responsive and reactive mode, where we had to make both radical and at times innovative changes to our practice. So that was what we call ERT, Emergency Response Teaching, or EPD, Emergency Professional Development, to now a much more developmental, incremental approach to reviewing how well our approaches are working for staff and students. And of course, what we want to be creating is active blended learning online, ABL. And we're in a process at the moment where we want to be able to look at what has worked well, how can we embed it, and how is this affected perhaps by subject. And that's why I've said mainstreaming niche enhancements as we move forward to the new business as usual. So where are we now in terms of some of the feedback? The university ran a Future of Work survey in April this year. And part of that survey, they asked questions about how well staff felt they had adapted to online teaching. And you'll see there's actually quite an even split between negative and positive comments, with 24% of people saying they felt it was about the same. I've pulled out again one of the positive comments. I found the seminar attendance on my modules has generally been much higher and more consistent online than pre-COVID. The quality of discussion has been better and students seem more engaged. And this has been reflected in module evaluations. I've also found a lot of committee meetings seem to work better online. And it's perhaps some of that last point, those transactional activities that we can achieve online that we will continue going forward. I should just add at this point that it wasn't, we also got feedback from professional service departments, and what we found that was working online with students not only improved engagement, but really helped them in their stage in the journey, really personalised the support. And I'm particularly thinking here about students seeking academic advice, support for disability, or perhaps careers guidance as we were going through COVID. On the right-hand side, we also asked staff from their perception which processes and practices they thought had transferred effectively to the digital environment. And these are in rank order. So the ones at the top are the ones that they felt translated well. So some of the pre-recorded lectures, one-to-one tuition, academic advising. The ones nearer the bottom, the synchronous lectures, enabling students to connect and collaborate, and the small group teaching and seminars were more difficult, they felt, to achieve online. I haven't put the numbers there because we've yet to evaluate through the full cycle. This was done in April, and we would like to go through the full cycle to see student outcomes in order to take these things forward into our planning. But just to give you a sense of the sort of thing that staff were saying, the reasons they gave for online teaching being a negative experience was the amount of time that it had taken to design and prepare online teaching resources, the impact on their health and well-being because of the screen time, lack of digital skills, and in some cases, lack of student engagement. More positively, staff felt that there was more flexibility for individual learning situations, and a chance for them to learn new skills and to refresh practice. They felt some of this was more of an interactive way of working with students, and in fact, some reported that they had enjoyed using technology to provide individualized, flexible, and engaging experiences for their students.
Got 2 minutes left, Louise.
Okay, if we see where the students are in this, online learning, what they were saying about online learning, this will be familiar to all of you, I'm sure. The two areas they identified were quality and standards and value for money. And of course, we know that there are sector drivers for this, given the OFS consultation on quality and standards and the Augur review that is coming in. Specifically, what students were concerned about, things like learning outcomes, and of course that was challenging when we had practical subjects. But as I indicated earlier, we were able to run virtual practicals, we ran virtual placements and exchanges, and we were also able to do performances online. However, much of our planning went into disarray because of the two lockdowns that we had in the academic year. And what became very clear to us was that while students felt safe and they felt that they could still study effectively, what they were missing was what I'll call relational pedagogy, the ability to relate to other students and also staff. So we had to turn our focus to providing more opportunities for staff and students to share practice, enhance contact time, provide more interactivity and better blends of face-to-face or asynchronous, synchronous delivery. And as I said, there's been some positive outcomes. We've been able to move more transactional processes online and focus on the more relational or transformational aspects of learning to promote higher engagement, better progression, and more timely interventions. So just to come to the summary of this, I think what we have seen is a paradigm shift over the last year. And it's a shift where we've gone from teacher to learner-centered education. I've given you some examples of the opportunities this has created in terms of accessibility, flexibility, and personalized learning, as well as pedagogical innovation and global opportunities. And if we look at the diagram on the left, this was taken from the Gravity Assist report, and Lara Bird talked about this in the last webinar. And what I've focused on today is the core part of this diagram, the digital access, the building skills, harnessing technology, and the design. But our challenge now is both to plan strategically and embed this inclusion in all that we do moving forward in our design of programs. So finally, what I wanted just to highlight is I wanted to acknowledge the work that has been undertaken by the Kent's e-learning team during the COVID crisis, and specifically Phil for organising this webinar series. I've just pulled out some statistics thanks to Phil, and in fact on a regular basis these update. But at the last webinar, David Martin had participants interact with his interactive tool, looking at their lecture experience. And what you see on the right-hand side from the last webinar is not only the national, but the international engagement of people with this webinar series. And in fact, Phil said to me yesterday, we now have 78% of UK universities having been represented in this webinar series. So I want to finish just by saying and sharing with you that the Kent's e-learning team has won this year's University Learning Support Prize for their outstanding contribution to education and the student experience. So thank you very much, and I will pass back to Phil.
Thank you, Louise, and apologies everyone for the technical problems we were having there. In fact, I seem to be experiencing some right now with Teams is flashing all over the place. So apologies, everyone. Please bear with me. I'm really sorry, Louise. We've actually run over time. I'm not sure we're going to have time to ask some questions here now, as we've got Helen due to start in now. I'm so sorry. Would it be possible to jump into the chat to answer some of the questions?
Yeah, I will do, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you.